introduce this?
Yes.
Well, I'm not sure what the best way to go about starting this, but I'll just kind of summarize again where we've been and where we're at, and what the council has kind of asked us to look at. I tried to summarize it a little bit in the memo I gave you on page 13. But basically, we had a workshop with the council in March. We decided at that time, the council decided at that time that they wanted to look at taking the requirement of a sidewalk or sidewalk out of the subdivision process and tying it to a more at the time of development. Meaning that when somebody came in and proposed a project, proposed a site plan, or proposed a conditional use permit, that would be the method that we would use to incorporate sidewalks, as opposed to our current method, which is it's tied to the subdivision. And unfortunately, we weren't distinguishing a subdivision of 70, 80, 100 lots from a subdivision that was 1 or 2 or 5 lots. So people who were doing little replats in town of 1 lot, 2 lots, or whatever, were getting stuck with the requirement of doing a sidewalk, or we even instituted a requirement or a policy of allowing them to pay in escrow if either it didn't make physical sense or it wasn't possible to build a sidewalk at this time, or if there was a project proposed in the area or whatever, we would allow them to escrow. There was quite a bit of objection to that, and so that all came up during the work session or during the discussion, and we thought about what about doing a sidewalk master plan. And the point of that would be we would identify on a plan everywhere that we felt like there should be sidewalks, and then as you come in and develop property, if you happen to be on a tract that would be on this plan, or be developing a tract that was adjacent to where we had sidewalk proposed, then it would be your obligation to do that. Okay, sounds simple enough, right? Well, we did that because we couldn't just make it a part of the site plan process if we didn't have the site plan tied to a master plan. Because we couldn't just look at it on a case-by-case basis. We felt like it would be better to have it on a plan. That way it would be simple for everybody who does development to know it, okay? So, we have started that process. I started that process to kind of come up with an inventory and trying to come up with a plan that we felt like would make some reasonable sense for us to consider. In addition, the council said, well, we want to look at the areas of town where we have existing sidewalks, but that we have gaps. Because we all talked about, why require somebody to put a sidewalk if there's nothing within a block on either side of them, or whatever the case is. That's a little easier to define in the downtown part of town than it is, out on the major arterials, etc. So I'll kind of start with that, and then we'll go off to the other kind of outer parts of town. What I've given you, and I know this is very rude, very rough, but it's the best I could do given the time I had. What you're looking at on this little map that has the red lines on it is those. Basically, I took everything that was in what we call a commercial historic district, and I even defined that closer to include basically everything from Austin Street on the north, San Antonio Street on the south, and Main Street, of course, Akron all the way to Elk. Now, Main Street I've taken beyond the limits, so I also have done that on Washington Street to the south. But basically, you can see, with the exception of Main Street, and more particularly the north side of Main Street, there's gaps everywhere. Okay? Obviously downtown, the Mark Plots and around City Hall, but there's, and for the most part around the courthouse, there are sidewalks. But all of these are not only kind of mixed bag kind of stuff, they're also different widths. Some of them meet ADA, some of them have intersections steps. They're just a pretty large hodgepodge of elements. Um, but nonetheless, at least we have some inventory of what's there. In our previous comprehensive plan, there was actually an effort done that went and looked at these blocks and actually graded the condition of the sidewalks if they existed. And of course, that thing is 20 years old plus now, so it's not, some of that stuff is not even existing anymore. So I didn't really give a whole lot of value to that, other than what I think I want us to focus in is that something that we feel is still critical. In other words, having mobility and having pedestrians be able to walk on sidewalks in the downtown commercial kind of historic area. I don't think anybody would argue that Main Street is obviously not our highest priority. We actually, the city, as part of the latest bond program that we did in 2004, allocated some money to put in sidewalks on the west part of Maine. We carried it all the way out to the Y on the north side, and then we started to come back. And what ended up happening was we took the money, some of the money that was supposed to be allocated for the south side, and we put it into the Friendship Lane sidewalk. That was done. That project was done about the same time, so that's one of the reasons you see some gaps on Main Street. Okay, and those are not that many. You can see there's none until you get between Orange and Milam Street, and that's actually in front of the Historical Society.
It's just not concrete.
It's just not paved.
Yeah.
There's a path there, but
Yeah,
it's not paved.
okay, that's what I was gonna ask about that.
Continuing west, you've got a piece there by the old Chrysler dealership. There's a piece. You can get through there, but it's not a sidewalk. Okay. As you go further west, Bowie and Acres, some of that's some vacant property there. Basically, that's just to give you a bearing. Let's see, that's Bowie Street is what goes down to what we always call Pass Hall. So that's the intersection there. There's some gaps there, and then as you go further west, there's more significant gaps out to the Trinity Motors there. So there's really 2.5 blocks there that are the most significant gaps there. If you look at Austin Street on the north, for the most part, what I consider to be the 100 block, both east and west, and then as you go down towards the museum, there's sidewalks. Then there's actually a path down to the combat zone that's actually designated in the street. It's not a sidewalk separate, but it's a designated path in the street, which is not ideal, but it gets you to and from, I suppose. The other problem there is you have the bridge does have a slim sidewalk on it, but it has steps on either end of it, so it's not a very safe passageway. We're also talking about redoing that bridge altogether. That sidewalk may be shifted to the south side of the road. We may put it on the south side, which is neither here nor there for us. Other than we're going to have to change our wayfinding signs because they're all currently on the north side of the road now. They get you down to the combat zone and back, which is not a huge deal. But going to Austin Street, as you go west of Adams, there's a piece there across from between Adams and Crockett. That's the piece that Bethany has now, where the vacant lot is. And then the next block has none, from where the Girl Scout cabin is, all the way over to Orange Street. And then you can see the bits and pieces there between Crockett and Orange on the south side. And there's some issues there. There's some slope issues. There's some places along there that don't have curves. Lindy Beerswall, her place is. That's the slope goes pretty significant there. So there's some physical constraints there that we have to deal with. And then as you continue west between Orange and Milam, there's very few sidewalks on that block either. And that's actually, I have the zoning map up there. I know it's hard to proceed, but I didn't feel like it was a critical, um, where we didn't have commercial zoning, that where the zoning transitioned to residential, whether it was R2 or R1. So as you go west on Austin, that block between Crockett and Orange over to Milam is R2, except for the intersection of Milam. Then you have a block of commercial where Madeline's is. That's commercial all the way over to Edison. And then it goes back to residential. You have those, well, I don't have the business listed here. You have to kind of, unfortunately, I don't have a video either to show you. I was gonna video everything, but I didn't have the time to do that. I apologize. I'm hoping that y'all can visualize this in your mind as we're going down the street. And then, San Antonio Street, again, really, from Milam, it really starts at Milam, and that's the block where St. Mary's School and church is in. You see a gap there where the Historical Society is. Now, I call it a gap. There's actually paving there, but it's grassed in. You could get through it. It's hardened, but it's just deteriorated to the point where it needs to be replaced. And then on the south side of San Antonio, between Orange and Crockett, that's the block with Pale Flower Shops in. There's some old historic homes in that block, and there's actually very few sidewalks in that block. That's across from Beckman's funeral home. Then the next block between Crockett and Adams, there's only one piece there, and that's across from the little park area that the county has. And you can see that there's not even a sidewalk on that property, except for the north side, where the gazebo is. And then where the jail is, you've got, for some reason, they've got a gap between the end of the jail where that driveway is, down to the corner of that. Then you pick up both sides of San Antonio, have it from Adams to Llano, the north side on Llano. The south side doesn't, except for the restaurant, Augustine has one. And then it gets a little tricky when you get to Lincoln. You've got on the north side, you've got where the Lincoln Street is. You've got a sidewalk there, and then on the south side, Shedders has a sidewalk down to where Brian and Rhonda live, and then there's no sidewalk from there down to Washington. And if y'all can visualize the north side of that street, you've got basically a drainage ditch that's paved with a retaining wall and driveways that go into the backs of those businesses and some of those homes there. So physically, getting a sidewalk in that block is going to be quite a challenge. Even if you're on the south side, it's relatively level until you get right to Washington Street, and there's probably 8 foot of drop between the surface of Washington Street and the grade below that. So I'm not asking us to focus on the why we can't do something, but I just want to let you know that what I'm going to say after a while is that there's a bunch of things that are going to be impediments that are going to drive the cost of these things really up, which is not necessarily a decision for us, but it's going to be a decision for the council ultimately when they, if this is the route that we're going to take. Okay? So I know this is a very difficult to kind of interpret, but I think, in my opinion, we should focus on San Antonio Street, Main Street, Austin Street, from some distance on the west side to some distance on the east side, and then the streets that run between those. And that seems to be more manageable than taking on, North Atlanta all the way from Maine to Frederick Road or something like that. Still maybe on our plan, but this is something that would seem to be, I think, a bigger bang for the buck.
Quick question, are the sewer and water pipes centered on the street, or are they a mix of left or right on the property line?
I don't know for a fact, but my guess is that they're probably not in a consistent location anywhere in those old parts of town.
Most
So
of them are over the south side of Main Street.
I'm not sure that that would be a huge deal, in considering sidewalk, because I think the sidewalk elevation would be high enough that it wouldn't necessarily, infringe on, very utility. Are you thinking that it might necessitate?
Well, I'm just thinking of old,
relocation or
if we have
something?
old pipes in certain sections of town, then are we gonna put a brand new sidewalk in a difficult terrain and then have to rip it all back up again?
Well, the advantage of sidewalk is it's typically only a certain width, it's not a street width. If you had to take a section out, a 5-foot section and cut it out, it's not like you're out, the size of the street or something like that. But are y'all in general agreement that if we're gonna look at the downtown area, that we ought to look at the downtown shopping area, the commercially zoned kinds of areas? Or do you think we ought to extend, Austin Street all the way out to, to the post office, for instance? That's something that's a destination of town. Right now there's no sidewalks, basically, west of mine.
Well, how are you coordinating with TechStop, considering most of that is in the state right of way?
Most of, well, Main Street is, but not.
So is there coordination with TechStop, or how does that play out?
We will coordinate with TechStop, but they will, particularly along Main Street, they will allow us to construct the sidewalk because we're responsible for the maintenance of that section. And they've already come in and done most of the, ramps at those intersections on Main Street. Now, it's gonna be hard to tie into them, but, yeah, we're not designing these things right now, Steve. We're just talking about completely conceptual links from point A to point B, and we certainly know that before we make any recommendation to the council or expect the council to adopt anything, we're gonna have more solid numbers, because we can't assume it's gonna be $20 a foot for a sidewalk, because when you gotta tear out, concrete, or you gotta buy an easement, or you gotta get around the driveway, or you gotta, reconstruct something, you gotta go around the utility pole. There's a number of physical issues, which I know you're well aware of, that we're gonna have to deal with. But this is the first kind of time we've talked about specifics on a plan. So we're open at this point in time, to any suggestions you may have, or any thoughts or comments, certainly.
So this would be the first plan, and then we start adding areas to it as we go, because we're sort of leaving out the middle school area where we have.
We haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
That's where we're gonna go next.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to focus on a part of it and then get to the bigger parts of the plan.
Okay.
Well, while you're saying that, let me just say that the city did 3 things with some of the money that we had. We extended the sidewalks west on Main. We did sidewalks on South Adams, basically from Strayers south down to Highway Street. But it's only on the east side of the road. Okay? So all the way down to basically American Bank of Texas, their little drive-through there. The other thing we did is we added sidewalks on Washington Street on the east side, from Subway down to basically where Judy's Liquor is, where the car wash is. Might wonder, well, why did we put it on that side of the road when we have 2 brand new hotels on the other side? Well, those hotels weren't there when that project was done. Marin Creek and Holiday Inn Express weren't even projects at the time. So the hotels were on the other side of the road, so that was the thinking. Plus, again, if you look at the west side there, between Main and the bridge, I mean, you've got, first of all, you've got huge impediments, you've got slope, you've got where where the restaurant is there on the corner,
Haley's.
the Haley's and the, people around that. The Gronas, they own the property on the corner there, and they own the B&B next to the Haley's. You know, you've got curved concrete retaining walls and curbs as high with steps in them, so it's gonna be a real challenge to try to get that figured out how you put sidewalks in there. So, and the bridge, of course, the bridge is not, you know, not even standard. You've got slope right off the back of the curb that goes back down the creek. You've got trees in the way. You've got, a number of things that are gonna be a real issue. That's the kind of thing that if the city, as council discussed, wanted to do a capital project to address a problem situation where we could get people from, you know, Barron's Creek and the hotels beyond up to Main Street, that would be the kind of project that, you know, the city, you know, might be willing to take on. Or the city taxpayers as opposed to a developer that might, you know, be responsible for that obligation.
Well, it's probably a safe assumption, Brian, that foot traffic will increase whether we have a sidewalk or not, right? On the west side of Washington Street.
Absolutely. In fact, we were out there looking at it today, and there was two people walking in the, well, the only place they could walk was in the street, from Main Street down to they went on down past the bridge, so, it's pretty dangerous.
And is the city liable for that sidewalk? There's one lawsuit would pay for the sidewalk in that area, right, basically?
We've been, not, claiming, we have a thing now where the owners are responsible for taking care of the maintenance in front of their place.
Right.
And so the city is claiming that it is not responsible for those.
And in that particular case, that's TxDOT right away, it's not the city right away. So.
And that's not to say we wouldn't at some point.
Well, it's not to say that we wouldn't be drug into something either, but because we've had that happen as well.
I mean, I like your plan of putting in the center and feathering out, so traffic needs it. The South Washington Street is just one that I see every time I drive it. Well, in the street, on the side, in the dirt, you know, whatever.
And I mean, I should say that this really isn't a plan, this is really an inventory, and I'm just.
It's a start.
If you guys feel like, you know, that's a reasonable thing to do, we can turn this into a plan, and just identify where we have existing sidewalks, and where we don't have sidewalks, and that becomes our priority.
Brian, with this quilt that we have now, I mean, are you proposing that we simply fill in those gaps then, and it may look or may not look similar or close enough, or are you going to actually have to do more than fill in?
Well, I think we can, we can talk about that right now. I mean, it's now's the time to do it. I mean, if the question is, like, let's say we're going to take it from Austin, Maine, and San Antonio, Akron to Elk, okay? And the reason I'm using those is because Akron is the end of our historic district on the east, or on the west, and Elk on the east, okay? But I would shrink it from that because most of that, until you get down to Edison, there's no commercial zoning. And I'm not sure that we need to be focusing on sidewalks in those residential areas. That's my opinion. I mean, that's purely my opinion. So if you started it at Edison Street, I would suggest going from there all the way to Elk on Austin Street. And then you can even take that beyond Elk to go down to the combat zone, which is all the way down to Lee Street.
Which you'll have to do because of the bridge potential.
Yeah, which you've got to strip down like the combat zone. They put a sidewalk in there, but you have a walk in the street up. And that would be on both sides of Austin Street. Then on Main Street, to me, it ought to be on both sides, all the way from the Y to the city limit line. And that shouldn't be limited to just the historic district. To me, that ought to be from city limit to city limit, basically,
On Main Street.
on Main Street. And then on San Antonio Street, you really don't start commercial zoning until you get to Milam. And you actually have commercial zoning on the north side, and then you have residential zoning on the south side. But you've got an existing sidewalk in front of St. Mary's all the way to the corner. So I would suggest that you incorporate that next block so you have a continuous, row all the way down. And I would take that all the way down to Washington Street. And then I would include all of the streets that run between those, north and south. And I would probably Edison Street's gonna be a bit of a trick because you got some serious grade issues to deal with there too, coming down the hill by, Tim Finwoggy's house and by the school. So conceptually, it sounds like a simple thing to draw on that.
Sounds like San Francisco.
But I think that would be something that, I would say we would include it in the plan, but it might be something that we have to look at the physical constraints that we have there to determine whether that's logical or not. Does that make some sense? And then on Crockett Street, we actually have a route that goes up to the school as part of our, actually the Parks Department did it, as part of a grant